Hey there guys, it's Metro, and we're back taking a look at Discipline Priest. And just when I thought this build couldn't get any better, we see that Discipline Priest had some really nice conceptual changes. And the one we're going to be focusing on today in this video is Holy Nova returning as a Discipline Priest spell. Really giving them an AoE damaging spell in general is the topic of this video. And I think one of the most generous things, one of the most progressive things that Blizzard could have done. They were so worried about giving them proper damage tuning to make sure that the healing wouldn't get out of control, that they removed all sources of AoE damage that they did. And, people have told me over the months, like, oh, well, you could do Purge the Wicked, whatever, etc. But, coming from MoP when you had Mindseer, it was just so nice to be able to actually contribute to these large pulls that people were doing in challenge modes. And that's the main reason why I don't play Discipline Priest at all anymore, because I just feel like I don't contribute to dungeons. It feels like it's not a spec that should be played in dungeons. And now we get this Holy Nova spell back. One little thing to bring up, though, of course, is it does very, very, very little damage and healing, too, actually. If you see the numbers on the screen, you'll notice that basically, like, if I'm hitting, like, 6 to 7 mobs with Holy Nova, it's probably still not going to do more damage than if I just penanced once. But we're basically in an alpha state of this spell. Obviously, we're in the alpha as well for the game, but take a look at it that way. Look at it like, all right, they're still figuring out how they want to balance AoE damage for Discipline Priest, but the fact that it's in the game is all we really need to talk about. It's time to rejoice, because it means that, Discipline will actually have a chance at being a carry healer again. In BFA, it's looking like they're going to make a lot of really nice adjustments to healers. Going to try to balance things out a lot more. And, luckily for me, one of my favorite specs ever in the game is kind of getting its day again. And that does look like it's going to be Discipline Priest. So, doing quite a lot of damage compared to other healers, but not quite a lot of damage compared to the group. Even with Holy Nova, before that, I was doing 0 damage on AoE. But realistically, I probably still could have penanced for about the same amount of DPS, because I'm doing like, we're pulling these really big packs, and I'm only doing like about 1,000 DPS with Holy Nova, and that's kind of scary, because that's basically what I would be doing if I just did my single target rotation. But like I said, regardless, the fact that we now have an option, you're going to see a lot in these pulls here. Like here's another one, just going to get tons of Holy Nova spam in, but the pack is dying so fast. You don't actually know. And I'm actually hitting that training dummy there, which is kind of funny. Hitting that training dummy with the spell, and it's kind of bugging it out. We're going to get stuck in combat for a while. It doesn't seem to affect the log, but even the Warlock's pets are still kind of bugged out there. Anyway, I'm actually really excited about that. But there's also another small buff that happened. It was Shadow Word Pain. It says now that it's 120% of spell power, dealing an additional 125% of spell power. And it's 120% of spell power, sorry. And now lasts 16 seconds, up from 14. So, I don't know if that's a huge change, but one with the other small buff to Shadow Word Pain, which I definitely think was underperforming, and giving us an AoE damage, any AoE damaging spell. Obviously, it's not Mindseer. I would have preferred if it was Mindseer. And it's only really because it's a ranged spell. Like having a ranged spell as a healer is obviously better than a melee spell, especially as Discipline, but it doesn't matter. We'll get used to it. Now, the only one downside that I could see here is that the way they've done it on the alpha is they basically it's the exact same spell for both Holy and Disc. People are saying they nerfed it. I don't see that in like the Wowhead build stuff, but it would make sense. And the reason I think the spell is so weak is now, of course, because it's going to be usable by Disc. And you still have to be concerned about this. Now, I don't know how it interacts with Atonement. Atonement reads that all spell damage you do is transferred through Atonement, but it also reads that Plea puts up Atonement, which obviously isn't even in the game anymore, so I'm not really sure how that's going to work. But regardless, I don't expect this spell to ever be overpowered, but I could already see the Holy Priest getting upset, because now, effectively, if they did nerf it for Disc and it's going to stay that way, then Holy is going to get a dramatic, it's going to get a lot worse for them too, and they're going to lose a lot of AoE damage. And frankly, that was kind of the only thing keeping them pretty relevant for Mythic Plus, was how much AoE damage they could put out so easily with Holy Nova spam. And now, the reason I've always loved Disc is because of their 5-man impact. So, giving this to them might seem like a slight to Holy, and I could totally understand why, but you got to go with the absorbs in 5-mans in these small group situations. This toolkit is very, very useful. It can have the potential to carry the group. It can have the potential to have a high impact. But without an AoE damaging spell or the ability to pick up a pig, which we also got, as you see in the video there. No, that's a joke. But anyway, without that ability to do any AoE damage, you're limited. You're not able to play the spec to the highest potential. And, that's part of why this priest has fallen so far behind in Mythic Plus, but Resto Druid has stayed at the forefront because they can do so much on-demand AoE, and even just with Sunfire spread, it's just a really easy thing for them to do. Whereas as a priest, or especially a discipline priest, you basically have no option. You have nothing. You don't have a single spell, and that's the thing. Like so. I don't normally play this priest. I haven't played one at all through Legion, really. I played at the beginning and then kind of gave up on it. But I'd love to hear what people who have been playing it through this time as a main, how did they feel about where their AoE damage, like, their multi-target, because obviously they have no AoE, where their multi-target damage is in Legion, and how this might potentially, affect the spec. And like I said, I'm already worried about balance of it. But the fact that Blizzard is, willing to give it a try means that I think we're going to see a lot of good in the future for Discipline Priest. And, like I said, you can't compete in 5-mans. You're never going to be a top-tier healer if you cannot do good AoE damage and good single target. And now, because of what's ever happening here with the melee changes, I don't expect that to stay that way, but Penance plus the mastery change that we saw in a couple builds ago, these things are really conducive to Discipline Priest doing good single target damage. Mindbender, etc., doing a lot of damage here. So this is great. But AoE was always the problem, and, relatively seeing a fix for that. Now, of course, like I said, the spell is doing pretty much less damage than any single target, but it's really got to be looked at as the alpha of the alpha for this spell, because I imagine a lot's going to change. And even, the next time I think and talk about this priest, like in another build, we might have seen yet another change. And this might not end up staying. We might not see Holy Nova. But I would just like to get a discussion started on this, because I feel like it's a really interesting thing. I feel like it's something that could be very... it's really going to swing the tide for Discipline Priest. And it's frankly one of the things I was most excited about in this build. Like, I obviously love Blood Death Knight. Everybody knows that. But... that build was huge for Blood Death Knight, and then when I saw this for Dis Priest, I was like, yo, did they make this build just for me? I don't know. So, anyway, we'll see what happens. That plus the Shadow Word Pain buff tells me they're thinking more about healer damage, and that's a big part of a 5-man progression, so it's pretty exciting. But one way or the other, the spell, like I said, does very little damage, and I think it's probably going to end up staying that way to the point where really won't be using it that much, but I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your guys' comments and your thoughts on the matter, but otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next one.